It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at Thunderstruck number 2 from the winter of 1981. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and this is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, we take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. And today we're continuing our look at a fanzine called Thunderstruck from the United Kingdom. This one is number 2 in the series, and it's from the winter of 1981. Hope you enjoy today's video. As I mentioned, we're continuing our look at the fanzine called Thunderstruck. Great name. This is Tim Kalvis and Mike Parnell, and you'll recall last time I mentioned they've agreed or told us that they're sort of agreed to switch who's responsible for it, and this one's Tim's turn to be in charge. This one's larger than we're used to. It's actually a little bit bigger than the 8.5 by 11 size paper we use here in the United States, but more or less it's module sized. It's slick paper on the covers and then regular paper in the middle. Pretty cool one. Again, one of the fantastic things about Thunderstruck here in these early issues, they have art by Alan Hunter, who is a famous fantasy role-playing artist, well known for his illustrations in the Fiend Folio within the Dungeons & Dragons world, in addition to other things that he did. So that's a real treat. And after we talk about the fanzine at the end, once again, I'll have a section where I just sort of highlight all the great illustrations that are in this fanzine for people who really like the art. So we start here again with the cover, and we have art by Alan Hunter, 2 different pieces of art. There's sort of a science-based, sci-fi-based picture up here that goes with an article from Traveler inside here by Alan Hunter, and then down at the bottom we've got art that comes from the continued adventure. This is part 2 of an adventure called Mindscape that's in this issue, and this is an Alan Hunter illustration down here at the bottom. So here's the sci-fi themed illustration, and then here is the fantasy themed illustration. It looks like you've got a fighter there, maybe with a sword, and this woman down at the bottom, and there's some sort of bird-like creature, and we'll talk more about that, but this is something that's pulled from the Mindscape adventure. There's not a lot. It's a nice sized fanzine, but there's not a lot of different things in here. They now have an article they're calling Bolts from the Blue. They have editorials and mentions of other things going on in the industry there. Then they have a review talking about Chivalry and Sorcery and Runequest as alternative games to Dungeons & Dragons, and they talk about comparing and contrasting the different games. And then Mindscape Part 2, which is the D&D adventure scenario. They call it a pictorial review of Games Day. They have some pictures and some comments about their attendance at that. Things Beyond, which is for Traveler, I'll mention that briefly. And then part of the Traveler article also has a new, I think, race or alien species called the Cathare, and then Ingame, which is just some notes at the end of the fanzine. A number of contributors this time. As I mentioned, Tim Kalvis, primarily responsible, Mike Parnell, the other one, who are the 2 people who put this together for us. And then contributions throughout from Brian Aldiss, Robert McMahon, Paul Mason, Ruben Powell, who does art, Alan Hunter does art, and Alistair McGilvery. All right, so let's dive into this fanzine. The first thing we have is Bolts from the Blue. That's their editorial, mentioning obviously we're back here with number 2, and it's often the case, they're asking people to continue to make good contributions. They thank Alan Hunter, Ruben Powell, and Alistair for their artwork. And they go on to give you a little bit of information here about what's going on in the industry. They say by the time this is out, X2, the basic expert sets, the new adventure module called Castle Amber will be here. And also U1, the Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh. And they call it F1, but I believe it ends up being UK1, Beyond the Crystal Cave, which comes from the United Kingdom. In addition, the Palace of the Silver Princess, B3, I1, Dwellers of the Forbidden City, will be out as well. And then they talk about S3, which is already out, and say S4 is coming out, and they're interested to know if it'll be like S3. If you remember, S3 had a whole section of illustrations in addition to the core adventure module that were part of it. And of course, that is how S4 came out. And then finally, TSR is going to be releasing what are called monster cards. I thought maybe I'll do a video on those. They're kind of cool. Not something I had when I was a kid, but I picked them up more recently, and I think they're kind of interesting. And then Games Workshop has announced they're no longer stocking fanzines, which is a disappointment. But he mentions you can get those fanzines still from a place called Games Center. And he also mentioned that Andreas Sarker, who edits the Stormlord fanzine, which is one we haven't done yet, has changed his address. So he's just got an announcement in here to share that with people. Okay, then we have a review, and they said they did get they were provided a copy of L1: The Secret of Bone Hill. They were down with Len Lakofka's adventure. I love Len. I think he's fantastic. But in any event, they sort of gave this one a 6 out of 10. Thought it needed some more work and wasn't as cohesive as it could have been. They also mentioned just briefly that there's some new Traveler merchandise that's been released, something called Striker, Salami Rem, Adventure 6, Adventure 7, Adventure 8, and then Book 6. So for those of you who are into Traveler, you might know sort of what those things are all about. Then we've got our comparison of Chivalry and Sorcery and RuneQuest. And, you know, long story short, he certainly recognizes, look, Dungeons & Dragons is the most popular game. If you want to be able to find someone to play a game, that's the most likely thing you'll do. This is Paul Mason, by the way, who does this article. But, and so he goes through, this is kind of interesting, and he scores CNS and RuneQuest. The price, you know, he says, he gives a nod to CNS. Layout and explanation, he gives RuneQuest a 9 out of 10, CNS only a 4. I think a lot of people say CNS seems like it's a fairly dense booklet, a lot of rules, try to be really realistic, but it's really heavy. I think I've read a couple people say like you got to read through it a few times before you're going to be able to understand how to play that game. It's not made to sort of, you know, read and go, simplified. RuneQuest much more designed to let someone sort of get into it quickly and start playing. RuneQuest generally likes their combat a little better, but likes them both better than D&D. But said CNS for him is the magic system within combat. The magic system is far and away his favorite. He gives it a 10 out of 10. And RuneQuest only gets a 4. And then skills, the use of the skills concept, you know, gives them both a fair mid score, 6s and 4. Background and the monsters. He said again, this is going to be a preference. His preference, he liked the CNS system better. So he gave them a 9, and RuneQuest only a 5. And so his overall impression is he thinks, again, while some things didn't score nearly as well, ultimately, based on his average points, he gives the nod to CNS as a better rule system. Although I think it's fair to say RuneQuest has become much more popular over time. And he does say that as well. You know, popularity can't be discounted, and at the end of the day, you want to be playing a game. You can find other people that'll play with you, and of course, that would give you Dungeons and Dragons. Even though like the rules, he thinks these rule sets are better. He said D&D is your best bet if you want to be able to find a game to play. But if you can get people to play with you, maybe you want to give one of these other systems, you know, give them a chance. All right, you can see this is a fairly expansive. It takes up a big chunk of the fanzine again this month. It's a really thorough, very interesting adventure. It's a fairly unique idea. Remember, you're on this sort of alternate existence inside the dream, and you got to find some keys to find your way out of this. So it's going to be complicated. I think you're going to have to continue to lead your players along in order to get out of here. One, so they have some sense of what's going on, because I think they could get really confused if they don't figure out what's going on. And two, how the heck they're supposed to get out of here successfully. It seems to me it's pretty tough. There's a city in a desert area here that you can go through and find some crystals that'll help you power this spaceship. We talked about the spaceship ship. It's like looks like a galley, right, that would float in the water, but it floats in the air. The crystals can be used to power it and help you move around. So that's kind of interesting. Some of that he says, you know, he's left for you to flesh out and make more details in the city. And then you get to this area called the Rift, which is like a valley, and it feels like a little bit like Lost World. There's a lot of dinosaurs, prehistoric things. There's this evil ancient race of saurians, like lizard-like men that predate elves, predate most of the monsters that we know of in D&D. Sort of this super ancient and very evil race bent on world domination kind of thing. And there's an enclave of them, and there's like a place, where they live. And like he says, if you're stupid enough, like 10,000 of them, right? And they're powerful and they're evil. And if your players go there, he's like, look, they're probably going to get captured and killed, because if these things capture you, they're just going to kill you. And he said, so if your players are stupid enough to try and think, well, maybe that's the path forward, is right through 10,000 powerful, evil opponents, then they're probably not going to make it out. But it's a good map. I could see all kinds of interesting things, very creative, very illustrative scenarios and encounters that could happen in this little Rift Valley as you try to find your way through. If you're playing it right, avoiding the lizard men at all, or the saurians at all cost, and for the most part avoiding the dinosaurs and other creatures in here as well. Really cool, and he's got a whole section of some new monsters that are in here, et cetera, et cetera. But that's Mindscape, a very unique and very challenging adventure, and like much bigger than most. It reminds me a little bit. Remember, Jaquays had Night of the Walking Wet, I think is what it was called. That was in the Dungeoneer, and it crossed across 2 different fanzines because it was so large. This is like full on the size of a TSR module, bigger than some that were produced at the beginning, for sure. Okay, so Games Day 81, I mean, he just points out, like, this is not so much playing games as it is selling games, because there was a couple different events, right, that took place in the UK that were organized by the guys at Games Workshop, and I'm pretty sure this is one of the ones that they did. They were there with their fanzine, so they were able to sell a lot of copies of their fanzine, and a lot of other people were selling fanzines. He mentions in here the folks from Black Rider were there, Black Rider and Stormlord were there, and they had a chance to talk with those guys as well as some other people. Here's their Traveler article, and I don't really do much with Traveler. I never played the game. This is by Robert McMahon, and he just has all kinds of different ideas for developing your Traveler campaign, and he goes through all kinds of different things, like your character classes, your starships, your worlds, your alien races, technical goodies, scenarios, etc., and how to sort of flesh that out. And he also goes through and gives this index. He's like, look, you can be really confused with Traveler, with what are all these books, and so he gives you like a little blurb about every single different book that's out so far on Traveler, what's in it, why you might want to buy it, or maybe don't need to buy it, depending on your campaign. So if you're into that, again, it's very thorough. And anyway, so that one was quite good. He even talks about publications made by different companies, Paranoid Press, Judges Guild, FASA, etc., and what products they'd produced. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it has also an article here that's a little alien race. It's a humanoid but with some cat-like features called the Cathare. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but that's essentially it. They're humanoid looking with some cat-like features and skills. They also have announcement here of scenario competition. They're trying to get people to make submissions, right? And so they have come up with this idea. They're going to give you essentially gaming products as your reward for giving them the best scenario. It could be D&D, Traveler, also Dragon Quest, RuneQuest, but especially D&D and Traveler. They want it to be original. They want it to be thorough, creative, and well thought out. And then finally, here's their last page. It's just called Ingame, and they're wrapping up, and they're really encouraging people, please give us ideas. They have ideas to maybe change the fanzine so that it's not just sort of D&D and Traveler related, but maybe also they talk about fantasy, sci-fi stuff like movies and books and other types of games besides role-playing games, to give them more stuff to talk about, which is, I think, part of an indication they're not getting much in terms of D&D, Traveler, RuneQuest, etc., contributions from the outside world. Even though, frankly, for issue 2, they have another number of contributions here compared to a lot of the fanzines we've looked at, I think. So I think they were doing pretty well. But I think one of the issues in the UK is if you had much in terms of material creativity, it seems like you were as likely to start your own fanzine as you were to decide to become a contributor, right? Now, some people clearly did, especially those APA-type fanzines. They sort of send them in and let somebody else put it all together. But an awful lot of these folks says, you know what, I can do as good a job as the other guys are doing. I'm starting my own fanzine. Of course, then what we see is 3-4 issues in, a lot of those, they start to run out of steam. This one will stick around. I've got 3 more. There's 5 of these total. I've got them all. And so we'll take a look at those other ones as we go forward. So if you want to stick around, I'm going to take a closer look at the illustrations that were in the fanzine. Again, a lot of good art in here, and because Alan Hunter is just a real all-star in my book, I'd like to share that with you. Here's a number of illustrations done by other folks. I think Ruben is the one who's done an awful lot of these here at the beginning. They're not all marked. I'm not sure who did the duck, for example, but I'm pretty sure the other ones were all done by him. And again, that's Ruben Powell. And then, again, not positive, but these might have been Alistair McGivery. Or there's somebody else who did some artwork, and these aren't signed, so I'm not sure. They signed them Fox, so I don't know what that means. That's nobody's name who got credit in here, so maybe that's somebody's code name. And then we get into stuff that was done by Alan Hunter, who's, of course, the one I think most of us would be most interested in, right? He's got this sort of a shield and a sword with some gems, and then here's some illustrations he did from the Mindscape pages. He's got this dragon, which is actually dragon turtle that you could face. He's got these stacked cubes with like this creature or some type of golem or some creature on top right with this sort of circle head with a giant eye in the middle. And then this one's kind of cool because you see these illustrations. He's kind of done a funky style of the people that are in shadow and light. And then if you pull back from that, there's like underneath or over top right, there's this silhouette of death with a scythe or sickle that is there as well. Kind of clever. And then here are some creatures that these guys are encountering as they walk through past these pillars, right, in the Mindscape. Lots of really interesting and bizarre or creative ideas are in there. And then you've got this creature that looks like it's from Cthulhu, as far as I'm concerned, and is pretty cool. And then the same Mindscape illustration with the guy holding the spheres was in the first iteration of this, I think. And then we've got the sci-fi thing from the Traveler article, this little iconographic design, and then the artwork that was on the end page, which is it's probably from Mindscape because there are these creatures that the Saurians use to fly and get around inside that Rift Valley. But looks like there's a woman there flying it here, and looks like it's coming down to eat this guy on ground level. But in any case, Alan Hunter does fantastic art. So that's it for Thunderstruck number 2, the second of 5 that we've done. We'll do some more next week. I hope you guys are all enjoying the videos. I hope you're enjoying our channel, and I hope you're subscribed. If you've got some friends who might enjoy our content, I hope you'll send them our way, and maybe they can become subscribers as well. That's it for this week. Have a great weekend, and until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.